Hello and welcome. Today's lesson we talked about simplifying fractions to lowest terms. I know we've talked about this in the past, so a lot of this is review, but we'll talk some greatest common factor pieces as well. In the lesson today we talked about how we go from 1 to 8 and how we go from 4 to 32. We noticed that we go times 8 for both of those. We remembered our little jingle of whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top, and so we multiplied times 8 and times 8 to get 8/32. We also then looked here, how can we go from 2 to 10 and 1 to 5 times 5. Here we did not have the 12, so we did 4 times what? Gives me 48. 4 times 12. We then knew that whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top, and we multiplied 1 times 12 to get our equivalent fraction of 12/48. So 1/4 and 12/48 are equivalent. We did the same thing down here. We found 8 times 8 gave me 64, so we did 7 times 8 gave us 56 on the numerator. 7/8 is equivalent to 56/64. We talked about how in math it's easier and sometimes simpler to work with the smallest numbers. So 12/15 simplify. We talked in group about how we could divide both numbers by 3. 12 divided by 3 gives us 4, and 15 divided by 3 gives us 5, so 4/5. Another student did notice that 8/10 would also be an equivalent fraction to 12/15 and 4/5, but 4/5 is the smallest and probably the easiest to work with in our mind. We then did a couple examples. 8/40 dividing by 8 gave us 1/5. One thing we talked again is divide straight across. 8 divided by 8 gives me a 1. 40 divided by 8 gives me a 5. So divide straight across your numerators, divide straight across your denominators. We did the same thing for 10/100ths, and we got 1/10. 12/18 divided by 6/6 is 2/3. Reminder, 6/6 is 1. 10/10 is 1. 8/8 is 1. So we are really dividing by 1. We talked about how 6/10 will reduce because both numbers can be divided by 2. 7/10 will not reduce because no number is divisible by 7 and by 10 evenly. We can't divide by 7 and 10 evenly. 9/12 will divide. We can divide both those by 3. We can divide 9 by 3. We can divide 12 by 3. 5/16 cannot be reduced. We talked greatest common factor. We did a couple things here. Greatest common factor is the largest factor that the two numbers share. So what can we divide by 8 and by 24? We did this first by listing out the factors. We listed that you could do to make an 8. Factors of 8 are 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. We then listed all the factors of 24. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. We circled all the common factors and we wrote those in the middle of our Venn diagram. So 1 is a common factor, 2 is a common factor, 4 is a common factor, and 8 is a common factor. We had all these extra factors here that are not circled, that are multiple or factors of 24. Those went in the 24 area in the Venn diagram. We have the center for the common ones, and the greatest common factor is 8. So the fastest way would be to divide it by 8, 1/3. We could have divided by 2. We'll show that you could have divided by 2 to get 4/12, and then divide 4/12 by 2 to get 2/6, and then divide 2/6 by 2 to get 1/3. But again, see what happens there. I went back and forth, and my iPad didn't like it, so that might have caused a little monkey wrench here, but we'll keep progressing. We talked then about simplifying these 3, and students did these in their notebooks. We talked about how you could divide 6/24, 8/24, and 12/36. Here's an example of student work, dividing those out perfectly. To solve, dividing both by 6/6, dividing numerator and denominator by 8/8, and dividing numerator and denominator by 12/12. 6 is the greatest common factor of 6 and 24. 8 is the greatest common factor of 8 and 24. 12 is the greatest common factor of 12 and 36. We talked about simplifying. What can we divide by? What's the greatest common factor? Essentially, 9, 5, and 3. We did notice too that not always can they be simplified. You see 9/25ths and you're like, wow, those are bigger numbers. I bet I could simplify them. In this case, we could not simplify those. 3/7, same thing. That's in simplest, lowest terms. We then did a couple more practices writing the numerator as factors. So we did 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. We then saw which could go into a 28. 2, 4, and 1 were multiples of 28. Are not multiples, factors of 28. And then we divided by 4/4. 28 in simplest terms is 5/7. We did that again here for 16/20. You can see a student work on this one. Student that did this one actually did 1 times 16 and 2 times 8 and then 4 times 4. You don't need to list 4 2 times. You just need to list it once. She then took her greatest common factor of the two numbers, 16 and 20, and noticed that 4 and 2 and 1 were all factors, but 4 was the greatest. We then divided by 4/4, and in simplest terms, 16/20 divided by 4/4 is 4/5. We was through these running out of time. We had great discussions. We got our homework. This is what our homework looked like. We talked about how this number here is 1/6. Equivalent to 1/6 would be 2/12, 3/18, 7/42, and 4/24. We took our 6 times 2 to get our 12 because 1 times 2. We took 6 times 3 to get 18, so we did 1 times 3. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. From 1 to 7, you're going times 7 to find the missing area would be 6 times 7 is 42, 7/42, and then 6 to 24 is times 4, so we did times 4 on top to get 4/24. This is the other example we did and class. Bottom half of the page, we talked about 3/4 is equivalent to 15/20. We did times 5, so we do times 5 to get our 20ths. Some review from beginning of the year, we talked about 4/10. We'd write it with a 4 in the 10ths place. We also did number 17 with 4 in the 100ths place. So for 100ths, we had to put in a 0 as a placeholder. 7/10 is how you would read this decimal, which is how you'd write decimal. We then simplified number 24 by dividing by 4. We did problems 36 and 37 together because those were a little difficult. We ended up having to do some math a couple times, long division, which is okay. We also divided by 9 to get, 27 108ths divided by 9 to get 3/12. We then divided 3/12 by 3 to get 1/4. So we had to simplify a couple times. Same thing here with 4096. We simplified it by 2 to get 20/48. We then divided by 2 to get 10/24. We then divided by 2 to get 5/12. So that was the answer for number 37. Your homework is due tomorrow. Thank you for watching our video.